My son trapped me in the spare room, like a prisoner, so I broke out and took the keys to his empire. The morning my son called me a burden and locked me in that spare room, having no idea I owned 30% of his $1 million law firm. My name is Dorothy Washington, and let me tell you how a 73-year-old woman broke out of her own son's prison and destroyed the empire she'd secretly built for him. Because when Marcus Washington decided his mother was too much trouble to deal with, he forgot one crucial thing. You don't bite the hand that feeds you, especially when that hand holds the keys to everything you think you own. Child, this story is gonna make you angry. It's gonna make you want to call your own mama and apologize for every time you took her for granted. And by the time I'm done, you'll understand why sometimes the most loving thing a mother can do is teach her grown child that actions have consequences. But before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps give me the strength to speak my truth. Now, let's get into my story. You see, for 45 years, I poured everything I had into my son Marcus. Every drop of sweat, every ounce of strength, every dollar I could scrape together went into making that boy somebody. When his daddy walked out on us when Marcus was just 8 years old, left one Tuesday morning for work and never came back, not even a note, I found Marcus that evening sitting on the front steps waiting. "Mama, when's Daddy coming home?" he asked, his little legs swinging back and forth, school backpack still on his shoulders. I knelt down and looked into those trusting brown eyes, and I made myself a promise right there on those concrete steps. I was going to raise a man who would never abandon his responsibilities the way his father had abandoned us. "Daddy's not coming back, baby," I told him, "but I am. I'll always come back." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and a pile of bills, figuring out how to keep Marcus in St. Augustine Catholic School. The tuition was more than my monthly salary at the department store, but I wasn't about to let my son's future die because his father was a coward. The math was brutal. I needed 3 jobs just to survive. Monday through Friday, my alarm screamed at 4:30 a.m. I'd dress in the dark, kiss sleeping Marcus goodbye, and be downtown cleaning offices by 5. 8 hours of scrubbing toilets and emptying trash cans for executives who never looked at my face. Then I'd race home, shower the smell of disinfectant off my skin, and transform my kitchen into a beauty salon. "Mrs. Washington, you work magic with these hands," Sister Mary Catherine would say when she came for her weekly wash and set. If only she knew those same hands had been elbow deep in someone else's garbage 3 hours earlier. My hands were raw from the cleaning chemicals, my back was bent from hunching over that ironing board, and my feet were swollen from standing all day. But I never let that child want for anything. New school clothes every fall, money for field trips, tutoring when he struggled with algebra. When the other kids got picked up by their parents in shiny cars after school, I was there in my beat-up Chevy, proud as punch to see my baby's face light up. Marcus was smart. Lord, was that boy smart. Honor roll every semester, debate team, student council. His teachers would tell me, "Mrs. Washington, that son of yours is going places. You should be so proud." And I was proud, so proud I could barely contain it sometimes. But Marcus had bigger dreams. He wanted Howard University, the Harvard of historically black colleges, he called it. The day he told me, we were sitting in that same kitchen where I did hair. "Mama," he said, his voice shaking with excitement. I got into Howard, full ride academic scholarship. I nearly dropped the hot comb I was cleaning. Full ride? Baby, are you sure? He handed me the letter, and I read it 3 times before the words sank in. Except when I called the financial aid office the next day to confirm the details, the woman on the phone had different news. Mrs. Washington, your son received a partial academic scholarship covering about 40% of costs. The remaining balance would be approximately $30,000 per year. 30,000 each year for 4 years. I hung up the phone and stared at Marcus's acceptance letter. That boy was so proud, had told everyone about his full scholarship. How could I tell him the truth would bankrupt us both? I couldn't, so I didn't. Instead, I visited every pawn shop in Southeast D.C. My grandmother's engagement ring, the one she'd worn for 60 years until the day she died, went first. The jeweler barely looked up when he offered me $300 for a ring that had watched 3 generations of women love and struggle and survive. This is worth more than that, I protested. Lady, that's my final offer. Take it or leave it. I took it. I took it because Marcus's future was worth more than my pride. I took out a second mortgage on my little house in Southeast D.C., the same house I'd been paying on for 15 years. I lived on peanut butter sandwiches and instant coffee for months, telling myself it was just temporary, just until Marcus got established. Every semester, I'd scrape together that tuition money somehow. Sometimes I'd work extra cleaning jobs. Sometimes I'd sell something else precious. When Marcus called home complaining about his dorm room or wanting money for books or social activities, I'd find a way to send it. I wanted him to have the full college experience, not to worry about money the way I'd had to worry my whole life. 4 years later, when Marcus graduated summa cum laude with a degree in political science, I was the proudest mama in that auditorium, sitting there in my best dress, the navy blue one I'd bought special and had been saving for something important. Watching my baby walk across that stage, I felt like every sacrifice had been worth it. Georgetown Law School. When Marcus told me he'd been accepted, I was folding laundry at 11 p.m. after working since 4:30 that morning. Mama, sit down, he said. I need to tell you something. The way he said it made my heart skip. What's wrong, baby? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. I got into Georgetown Law. I dropped the towel I was holding. Georgetown? Baby, that's... I know, it's the best. It's everything I've dreamed of. His face was glowing. There's just one thing. Of course there was. They don't give full scholarships for law school like they do undergrad. The tuition is $55,000 a year. 55,000 times 3 years. I did the math in my head while Marcus kept talking about his dreams of corporate law and making partner at a big firm someday. Mama, did you hear me? I heard you, baby. When do you start? That night, I sat at my kitchen table with every bank statement, every insurance policy, every piece of financial paper I owned spread out in front of me. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock on the wall. The same clock that had been there when Marcus was little, counting down the hours until I had to figure out another miracle. The second mortgage on my house would cover the first year. My life insurance policy had a cash value I could borrow against. That was the second year. For the third year, I picked up my mother's china from the cabinet and held a plate up to the light. Hand-painted roses, gold trim, never used except for Christmas and Easter. My mother had received it as a wedding gift in 1952, had protected those dishes through poverty and hardship and two moves. Sorry, Mama, I whispered to her memory, but your grandson's going to be a lawyer. I picked up a fourth job, cleaning a medical office on Sundays after church. I was working 7 days a week, barely sleeping, but I told myself it was an investment in our family's future. Georgetown Law School. 3 more years of sacrifice. 3 more years of me living like a pauper so my son could live like a prince. But when Marcus graduated with his JD, when I watched him shake hands with the dean and pose for pictures in his cap and gown, I knew I'd done right by that boy. Marcus came home after graduation full of plans and ambition. He was going to start his own law firm, specialize in corporate law, make millions representing big companies. The fire in his belly reminded me of myself at his age, ready to take on the world. But starting a law firm isn't easy, especially for a young black lawyer in D.C. The first few years were rough. Marcus was working out of a shared office space, taking whatever cases he could get, struggling to build a reputation. More than once, he called me worried about making rent, wondering if he'd made a mistake trying to go out on his own. That's when I started sending him business. Every person I knew who needed legal help, my church friends dealing with wills and estates, my neighbors fighting landlords, my coworkers with employment issues. I sent them all to Marcus Washington, Esquire. I'd tell them he was the smartest, most dedicated lawyer they'd ever find, that he'd fight for them like they were family. And he was good. Marcus had inherited my work ethic and my determination. Plus, he had that education I'd bought him. Slowly, steadily, his practice grew. He moved into his own office, hired a secretary, started getting referrals from other lawyers. Within 5 years, Marcus Washington, Esquire, was one of the most respected small firms in the city. That's when he met Vanessa. Vanessa Sinclair was everything I wasn't: young, light skinned, college educated, and raised with money. Her daddy was a doctor, her mama was a teacher, and she carried herself like she'd never known a day of real struggle in her life. She was pretty, I'll give her that, with her straightened hair and her designer clothes and her perfect smile. Marcus was smitten from the first day he met her at some Lawyers Association event. He'd call me gushing about this amazing woman he'd met, how sophisticated she was, how she understood his ambitions. I should have been happy for him, but something about Vanessa rubbed me the wrong way from the start. Maybe it was the way she looked at my little house when Marcus first brought her home to meet me. Not disgusted exactly, but like she was seeing something quaint and outdated, like visiting a museum. Or maybe it was how she complimented my cooking in that voice people use when they're trying to be polite about something they don't really appreciate. Mrs. Washington, she'd say in that sweet voice, this cornbread is so authentic. I bet you learned to make it from your mother. Like authentic was another word for primitive. But Marcus was happy, and that's all that mattered to me then. If this was the woman he loved, I was going to love her too, even if she never quite seemed to warm up to me the way I hoped she would. They got married 2 years later in a big ceremony at some fancy hotel in Northwest D.C. Vanessa's family paid for most of it, which was probably for the best since I was still paying off the loans I'd taken for Marcus's education. I wore my best dress, that same navy blue one from his college graduation, and sat in the front row, beaming with pride as my son married his beautiful bride. The early years of their marriage were good ones, at least from where I sat. Marcus's practice continued to grow. They bought a beautiful house in Potomac, and they seemed happy together. Vanessa got pregnant with their first child, and I was over the moon about becoming a grandmother. But then something happened. Vanessa miscarried in her second trimester, and something in both of them changed after that. They became more focused on their careers, more driven to succeed, and somehow more distant from everything and everyone that reminded them of family and obligation. Marcus's visits became shorter and less frequent. Instead of coming by for Sunday dinner every week like he used to, he'd stop by maybe once a month, always in a hurry, always checking his phone. When I'd call him at the office, his secretary would tell me he was in meetings or with clients. When I'd call his home, Vanessa would answer with that polite voice and tell me he wasn't available. I told myself they were just busy building their success. Marcus was making more money than I'd ever dreamed of, taking cases for major corporations, getting his name in the legal journals. Vanessa had started her own consulting business, something to do with marketing and social media that I didn't really understand, but that seemed to be doing well. They moved to an even bigger house, bought expensive cars, started traveling to places I'd only seen in magazines, and I was happy for them, truly I was. Every success they had felt like validation that all my sacrifice had been worth it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere along the way, my son had forgotten where he came from. When I'd mentioned the old days, how hard we'd worked to get him through school, he'd get this uncomfortable look on his face, like he didn't want to be reminded. When I'd talk about my health problems or my struggle to keep up with the bills on my little house, he'd change the subject or suddenly remember an important call he had to make. The first real sign of trouble came 2 years ago when I had my hip replacement surgery. I'd been putting it off for months because I was scared, scared of the surgery, scared of the recovery, scared of being helpless. But the pain got so bad I couldn't ignore it anymore. I called Marcus from the pre-op room at the hospital, my voice shaking with fear and pain medication. "Baby," I said, "I'm about to go into surgery. I know you're busy, but I'm scared. Could you maybe come sit with me for a few minutes?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Marcus said, "Mama, I'm in the middle of a huge case, multi-million-dollar deal that closes tomorrow. Can't you call Sister Johnson from church? Or maybe one of your other friends?" One of my other friends, like Sister Johnson, bless her heart, owed me something that my own flesh and blood didn't, like the woman who'd raised him, educated him, and built his entire foundation didn't deserve his presence during the scariest moment of her life. "It's okay, baby," I said, because that's what I always said. "I understand. You're busy. Important things to do." But it wasn't okay. As they wheeled me into that operating room, surrounded by strangers, all I could think about was how I'd sat with Marcus through every fever, every nightmare, every scraped knee and broken heart. I'd been there for every important moment of his life, but when I needed him most, he couldn't spare an hour. The surgery went fine, but the recovery was hell. 3 months of physical therapy, learning to walk again, fighting through pain that made me understand why some old people just give up. And I did it alone. Marcus called to check on me a few times, brief conversations where he asked how I was feeling and seemed relieved when I said I was managing fine. Vanessa sent flowers once. Beautiful arrangement. Probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month, with a card that said, "Hope you feel better soon. Love, Marcus and Vanessa." Like I was some distant acquaintance instead of the woman who'd made their success possible. I started to feel like I was becoming invisible, like the stronger and more successful Marcus became, the more irrelevant I became in his life. but I pushed that hurt down deep, the way I'd been doing my whole life. I told myself he was under pressure, that success came with sacrifices, that this was just a phase. I was wrong about that too. The breaking point came 6 months ago on a Tuesday morning in November. I was in my kitchen making coffee when I felt something strange in my head, like a wave of dizziness and confusion that came out of nowhere. I tried to sit down, but my left side wasn't working right. My arm felt heavy and numb, and when I tried to speak, the words came out slurred and wrong. I managed to call 911, though I'm not sure how. The paramedics found me on my kitchen floor, conscious but scared out of my mind. At the hospital, they told me I'd had a mild stroke. Nothing major, they said, but enough to be a warning shot. I called Marcus from the emergency room, my words still slurred from the medication they'd given me. This time, he came, but not alone, and not out of love or concern. He brought Vanessa and some man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Dr. Peterson, a geriatric care coordinator. They stood around my hospital bed like vultures circling roadkill, talking about me like I wasn't there. Dr. Peterson asked questions about my living situation, my support system, my ability to care for myself. Marcus answered most of them, painting a picture of a confused, helpless old woman who could barely function on her own. She's been having memory issues, he told the doctor, which was news to me. Forgetting to pay bills, leaving the stove on, that sort of thing. I tried to protest, but my speech was still affected, and they seemed to take my slurred words as evidence of cognitive decline rather than stroke symptoms. Mrs. Washington, Dr. Peterson said to me in that slow, loud voice people use with children and the elderly, your son is concerned about your safety. Living alone after a stroke can be very dangerous. I'm fine, I managed to say, though it came out garbled. Want to go home? See? Marcus said to the doctor. She's not thinking clearly. We need to discuss her options. Her options, not my options. Like I wasn't a grown woman who'd been making my own decisions since before this boy was born. The next day, when my speech was clearer and my mind was sharper, Marcus came back with a different approach. He sat beside my bed and took my hand, his voice soft and caring. Mama, he said, we've been talking, and we think it would be best if you came to stay with us for a while. Just until you get back on your feet. I don't need to stay with you, I said. My house is fine. I can take care of myself. Mama, be reasonable. What if you have another stroke? What if something happens and there's no one there to help you? I have neighbors. I have friends from church. I have my life in that house. Marcus's expression hardened slightly. Mama, you're being stubborn. We're trying to help you here. Don't make this harder than it has to be. That word, stubborn, like wanting to live in the home I'd worked 3 jobs to keep, surrounded by my own things and my own memories, was some kind of character flaw. We've found you a nice place, he continued, a senior community, very upscale. You'll have activities, meals prepared, medical care on site. It'll be like a vacation. I don't want a vacation. I want my home. Your home isn't safe for you anymore. Vanessa chimed in, speaking for the first time since they'd arrived. You need to start thinking about what's practical instead of being sentimental about some old house. Some old house. The house I'd bought with my own money, maintained with my own hands, filled with memories of raising her husband. Some old house. But I was tired, still weak from the stroke, and they kept pushing and pushing until I finally agreed to a temporary arrangement. Just until I got stronger, they said. Just until we could figure out a permanent solution. The senior community turned out to be their house, not the mansion in Potomac. Oh no, that was too good for old Dorothy. They'd bought a smaller house in Silver Spring, a rental property they'd been planning to flip, and decided to use it as my temporary residence instead. It's perfect, Marcus assured me as they moved my few belongings into the spare room. You'll have your own space, but we'll be close by to check on you. And it's just temporary, remember? Just until we can find you something more permanent. The room was barely 10 by 12 feet, with one small window that looked out at the neighbor's chain link fence. They'd furnished it with a single bed, a small dresser, and an old television that only got basic cable channels. No internet, no phone line in the room. You don't need those distractions, Mama. Focus on getting better. At first, I told myself it wasn't so bad. At least I was close to family, right? Marcus would visit every few days, asking how I was feeling, bringing me groceries. Generic brands, I noticed, the cheapest versions of everything. But I told myself he was being practical with his money. How are you settling in, Mama? He'd ask, sitting on the edge of my narrow bed like he was visiting someone in the hospital. It's fine, I'd say, because what else could I say? When do you think I'll be able to go back to my house? Oh, we're still working on that. The doctors want to see how you do here first. Make sure you're really stable before you live alone again. But I felt stable. My speech was back to normal. My strength was returning, and my mind was as sharp as it had ever been. When I mentioned this to Marcus, he'd get that concerned look on his face. Mama, stroke recovery takes time. You can't rush these things. The doctors say it can take months, even years, to fully recover. We just want to make sure you're safe. Safe. That word became like a cage around me. Slowly, things got worse. First, they took my car keys. I'd been driving perfectly fine, had taken myself to doctor's appointments, to the grocery store, to church. But one day Marcus showed up with a serious expression. Mama, we can't let you drive anymore. Doctor's orders. What doctor? I just saw Dr. Mitchell last week, and he didn't say anything about not driving. Dr. Peterson thinks it's too risky. After a stroke, your reflexes might not be what they used to be. What if you hurt yourself or someone else? I've been driving for 50 years without hurting anyone. Mama, please don't make this a fight. We're just trying to protect you. Protect me. From what? From living my own life? They took my keys, and suddenly I was completely dependent on them for everything. Want to go to the grocery store? Call Marcus and hope he had time. Want to visit friends? Better make sure it was convenient for Vanessa's schedule. Want to go to church? Well, that became a problem too. Then they installed locks on the doors from the outside. I discovered this one morning when I tried to go out to get the mail and found I couldn't open the front door. The handle turned, but the door wouldn't budge. I called Marcus immediately. There's something wrong with the front door. I can't get it open. Oh, that. We had security locks installed. For your safety, Mama. We don't want you wandering off and getting confused. Confused. There was that word again. Like I was some senile old woman instead of someone who'd been running her own household and making her own decisions since before this boy was born. I'm not confused, Marcus. I just wanted to get the mail. I'll get the mail when I come by later. You don't need to worry about things like that anymore. Things like getting my own mail, things like walking outside my own front door, Things like having any control over my own life. The final straw came 3 weeks ago. I'd been feeling stronger, my energy was back, and I wanted to go to church. It was Sunday morning, and I got dressed in my best dress, the blue one with the white flowers that always made me feel dignified and put together. Mount Olive Baptist had been my church home for 40 years. I'd sung in the choir, served on the usher board, helped in the kitchen for countless church dinners. Those people weren't just my congregation. They were my family, and I hadn't seen them in months. I tried the front door, locked from the outside. I tried the back door. Same thing. I knocked on Marcus and Vanessa's bedroom door, my heart pounding with frustration and anger. Marcus opened the door just a crack, like I was some kind of intruder in what was supposed to be my temporary home. "Mama, what are you doing up so early?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep and irritation. "I want to go to church," I said simply. "Church?" He looked at me like I'd said I wanted to go to the moon. "Mama, it's not even 7 o'clock. Service starts at 10. I like to get there early to talk to people, help set up if they need me. You know that." "Mama, you're not well enough for church. All those people, all that noise, all that standing and sitting. You need to rest." "I've been resting for months. I feel fine. I want to see my friends, hear Pastor Williams preach, sing the hymns I love. I need to go to church, Marcus. You need to go back to bed and stop this foolishness." Foolishness. My faith, my community, my spiritual life. Foolishness. "I've been going to Mount Olive Baptist for 40 years, I said, my voice getting stronger with each word. "I am not missing another Sunday." That's when his mask finally slipped. That's when I saw the real Marcus, not my successful lawyer son, but the cold, calculating man he'd become. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice low and mean. "You're sick, Mama. You had a stroke. You're not thinking clearly, and frankly, you're becoming a burden." A burden. My own son called me a burden. "Vanessa and I have our own lives to live," he continued, his voice getting harder. "We can't be worried about you wandering around the city, embarrassing yourself and us. We're doing you a favor letting you stay here instead of putting you in one of those state facilities where they warehouse people like you. People like me, old people, useless people, inconvenient people. Now go back to your room and stop making trouble," he said, "and don't wake us up again with this nonsense." He closed the door in my face. I heard the lock click. That's when I understood the truth. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't about my health or my safety. This was about control, about keeping me quiet and out of the way while they lived their perfect life in their perfect house with their perfect friends who would never have to know that Marcus Washington, Esquire, had a troublesome old mother who might embarrass him at social events. They thought I was just some helpless old woman they could lock away and forget about. They thought I'd lost my mind along with my health. They thought I'd be grateful for their charity and never question their decisions about my life. They were wrong, dead wrong. See, there were things about Dorothy Washington that my son never bothered to learn, never bothered to ask about. Things I'd never told him because I'd been too busy working and sacrificing to sit around talking about myself, and because he'd never shown enough interest in my life to find out. Like the fact that before I became a cleaning lady and a hairdresser, I'd worked as a bookkeeper for Morrison and Associates, a small accounting firm downtown. I'd been good at it too, good with numbers, good at spotting irregularities, good at following money trails. I'd kept those skills sharp over the years, managing the church treasury and helping neighbors with their taxes every spring. Like the fact that I'd been quietly investing my tips and small savings for decades. Nothing fancy, nothing risky, just steady contributions to mutual funds and retirement accounts that I'd researched carefully. While Marcus was building his visible empire, I was building my own invisible one, slowly and carefully and completely under the radar. Like the fact that I'd been reading everything I could get my hands on about elder law, estate planning, and financial abuse ever since my friend Gladys got swindled by her nephew a few years back. I'd educated myself about the legal rights of seniors, about what constituted exploitation, about how to protect yourself when your own family turned against you. But most importantly, there was something Marcus didn't know about the foundation of his success, something I'd never told him because I'd wanted him to believe he'd earned it all on his own merit and hard work. Remember that full scholarship to Georgetown Law School? The one he'd bragged about to everyone who would listen? The one that had made him feel so proud and accomplished? It wasn't a scholarship. It was me. I'd been paying his full tuition the entire time, selling everything I owned piece by piece to cover the costs. Every semester for 3 years, I'd liquidated another piece of my life. My mother's wedding china, gone to pay for his first year. My grandmother's quilts, hand-stitched over decades of winter evenings, sold to cover his second year. Even the wedding ring from his father, the one piece of jewelry I'd kept all those years thinking maybe someday it might mean something to Marcus, pawned to pay for his final semester. I'd let him believe in that scholarship because I wanted him to feel worthy of his success, not burdened by the extent of my sacrifice. I'd wanted him to walk into his career with confidence, not guilt. And when he graduated and started his law firm, struggling to get clients in those early years, I'd been his secret weapon then too. Every referral that came his way, every client who chose him over more established firms, that was me, working my network, convincing people to give my boy a chance. You need to call Marcus Washington, I'd tell Sister Johnson when she was having trouble with her landlord. He's the smartest lawyer you'll ever meet, and he'll fight for you like your family. My son is a lawyer, I'd mentioned to Mrs. Patterson when she was dealing with her husband's will. Just graduated from Georgetown. He knows everything about estate law, and he won't charge you what those downtown lawyers charge. One client became two, two became five, five became 20. I built his reputation one conversation at a time, one recommendation at a time, one success story at a time. But there was more, much more. 5 years ago, when Marcus was expanding his firm and needed capital, the banks weren't lending to small businesses, especially Black-owned businesses. He was desperate for an investor, someone who believed in his vision and was willing to put serious money behind it. He came to me one evening, more vulnerable than I'd seen him since he was a child. We sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd helped him with homework all those years ago, and he laid out his business plan. "Mama," he said, "I need $300,000 to take this firm to the next level. I need to hire more lawyers, get better office space, take on bigger cases. But no bank will touch me, and I don't know any investors who would take a chance on a small Black firm." I told him I'd ask around, see if anyone in my network might be interested. What I actually did was something I'd been planning for years, ever since I realized my son was going to be more successful than I'd ever dreamed. I liquidated most of my retirement savings and investment accounts, money I'd been accumulating for decades through careful budgeting and smart investing. I created a shell company called Wellington Holdings, LLC, and invested that money in Marcus's firm as a silent partner, $300,000. My entire life savings, everything I'd scraped together over 40 years of working multiple jobs and living below my means. I gave it all to him, structured as a legitimate business investment that would give me 30% ownership of his law firm. Marcus Washington, Esquire, got the capital injection he needed to become the success he is today. The investment was structured so professionally, through such proper legal channels, that Marcus never questioned where the money came from. He assumed it was some anonymous investor who'd heard about his potential and decided to take a chance. 30% of everything. For 5 years, I'd been a silent partner in my son's success, entitled to 30% of the profits, 30% of the decision making power, 30% of everything he'd built. And he never knew his own mother was his biggest investor, his secret benefactor, the foundation of his entire empire. I'd kept quiet about it because I wanted him to feel proud of his achievements. I'd wanted him to believe in his own worth, not feel like he owed his success to his mother's charity. I'd thought that someday, when he was truly established, when he didn't need to prove himself anymore, I'd tell him the truth and we'd laugh about how I'd been his angel investor all along. I'd never imagined that my successful, accomplished son would repay my lifetime of sacrifice by locking me in a spare room and calling me a burden. That night, after he'd told me I was becoming too much trouble, after he'd dismissed my desire to go to church as foolishness, after he'd made it clear that I was now nothing more than an inconvenience in his perfect life, I lay on that narrow bed in that cramped room and made my plan. They wanted to treat me like a prisoner? Fine, but every prisoner dreams of escape, and some of us are smart enough to make it happen. The next morning, I started my research. Turns out, when you're locked in a room all day with nothing but time on your hands, you can get a lot done with just a basic tablet, which Vanessa had given me months ago so I could watch my stories and stop bothering them with requests for entertainment. What they didn't realize was that I was far more technologically savvy than they assumed. I'd been using computers and the internet for years, keeping up with the digital world because I refused to be one of those old people who got left behind. I knew how to research, how to access public records, how to trace financial information online. I started with my own records, the ones I'd kept meticulously over the years: bank statements, investment records, legal documents, all of it stored in a safety deposit box at First National that Marcus didn't know existed. Years ago, I'd started scanning and organizing everything, keeping digital copies of my entire financial life stored in cloud accounts that were password protected and completely private. It took me 3 days of careful work, but I reconstructed my entire financial history, documenting every investment, every transaction, every dollar I'd ever spent on Marcus's education and career. The numbers were staggering, even to me. Over $500,000 in today's money, all of it flowing from my hands to his future. Then I moved on to Marcus's business records. Amazing how much information is public record when you know where to look and you have the patience to dig. Corporate filings, partnership agreements, real estate transactions, court records, all available online if you know the right databases to search. What I found made my hands shake so badly, I had to set the tablet down and take 3 deep breaths. They weren't just keeping me prisoner and stealing my grocery money. This was systematic, calculated theft on a scale that took my breath away. That night, I called James Crawford for the first time in 2 years. "Dorothy? Lord, where have you been? I've been worried sick. Just hearing his voice, someone who knew me as a person, not a problem to be managed, made me start crying for the first time since this nightmare began. James, I said through my tears, I need help. My own son has been stealing from me, and I'm trapped in his house like a prisoner. Slow down, honey. Tell me everything. So I did. Every detail, every humiliation, every dollar stolen. When I finished, the line was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Dorothy, James finally said, his voice tight with anger. What they're doing isn't just morally wrong, it's criminal. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, false imprisonment. We're talking about serious felony charges here. I don't want to destroy my son's life. Honey, your son destroyed his own life the day he decided to steal from his mother. We're just going to make sure he faces the consequences. The next morning, I did something I should have done months earlier. I started documenting everything with my tablet's camera. The locks on the doors, click. The cramped room with its single window, click. The generic food they were feeding me while billing Medicare for premium medical supplies, click. But the most important photo was the one I took of myself, sitting on that narrow bed in that prison cell they'd made for me, looking directly into the camera with my eyes clear and my voice steady. My name is Dorothy Washington. I am 73 years old, and I am of sound mind and body. Today is Thursday, February 15th, and I have been held in this house against my will for 6 months by my son Marcus Washington and his wife Vanessa Washington. I was no longer going to be silent about what they'd done to me. James had been my lawyer for 30 years, ever since I'd first bought my house and needed help with the legal paperwork. He was around my age, a man who'd built his practice representing working people, people who needed legal help but couldn't afford the fancy downtown firms. Over the years, he'd helped me with my will, my investment accounts, and various legal questions that came up in my life. More importantly, James was a man who understood that being old didn't mean being stupid, and being someone's mother didn't mean being their property. Dorothy, he said after I'd explained my situation, what they're doing isn't just morally wrong, it's criminal. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, false imprisonment. We're talking about serious felony charges here. I don't want to put my son in prison, I said, though part of me wasn't entirely sure that was true anymore. Then we give him a chance to make it right, James said. But first, we need to get you out of there. What they're doing is illegal, Dorothy. They can't hold you against your will, no matter what lies they tell themselves about your mental state. How do we do that? Leave that to me. I've been handling elder abuse cases for 20 years. I know exactly what steps to take. The escape itself was like something out of a movie, except the hero was a 73-year-old woman in a blue dress instead of some action star. I waited until exactly 9:15 a.m., 15 minutes after Marcus and Vanessa's cars had pulled out of the driveway. I'd been timing their departures for weeks, and they were creatures of habit. Marcus left at 8:45 sharp. Vanessa followed at 9, and neither of them ever came back before 6 p.m. My hands were shaking as I dialed James's number on the kitchen phone. "It's time," I said when he answered. "You sure about this, Dorothy?" "Once we start, there's no going back." I looked around at the house that had been my prison for 6 months. The locked doors, the cameras Marcus had installed to monitor my safety, the refrigerator stocked with generic food while they ate organic. James, I've been ready for months. Let's get me out of here. 23 minutes later, I was watching the clock. Tony's pickup truck pulled into the driveway. Behind him was a small van with Anderson Locksmith Services painted on the side. The locksmith was a woman about my age named Patricia, who took one look at those exterior deadbolts and let out a string of words that would have made my pastor blush. Honey, she said to me, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I ain't never seen anything this sick. They got you locked up like you're dangerous instead of family. How long will it take? I asked. 5 minutes per lock, and I see 4 of them. We'll have you free in 20 minutes. As Patricia worked, Tony loaded my belongings into his truck. Not much to show for 73 years of life. 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of photos, my mother's Bible, and the tablet they'd given me to keep me quiet. Mrs. Washington, Tony said, Uncle James told me to ask. You want to take anything else? Anything that belongs to you that they might try to claim later? I thought about that. What in this house was actually mine? The microwave, I said suddenly. I bought that microwave 3 years ago when Marcus's old one died. It's mine. Tony grinned. Yes, ma'am. Anything else? The coffee maker, the good towels in the hall closet. I gave those to Marcus as a housewarming gift, and that painting in the living room of the lighthouse. I bought that at a church bazaar. It felt good claiming my belongings, taking back pieces of my life that they'd absorbed into their perfect home. But the most important thing I took wasn't an object. It was the evidence. While Patricia finished with the locks and Tony loaded the truck, I walked through that house with my tablet camera, recording everything. The refrigerator stocked with cheap food, the pill bottles they'd been giving me, expired medications that could have made me sick, the mail they'd been hiding from me, stacked on Marcus's desk in his home office. My name is Dorothy Washington, I said to the camera as I stood in what had been my prison cell. Today is Thursday, February 22nd, and I am leaving this house where my son and his wife have held me prisoner for 6 months. This is my room. I panned the camera across the cramped space, the single bed, the tiny dresser, the window with bars they'd had installed for my safety. This is where Marcus Washington, attorney at law, kept his mother locked up while he stole $60,000 from her bank accounts. Then I left them a note. Not the polite, gentle note I'd originally planned, but something with teeth. Marcus and Vanessa, I've decided to take your advice and find a living situation more suited to my needs. Don't bother looking for me. I'm exactly where I choose to be. I've also decided to take a more active interest in my financial affairs. You'll be hearing from my lawyer soon about some discrepancies in my accounts. And Marcus, you might want to review the corporate filings for Wellington Holdings, LLC. I think you'll find them very educational. Your mother and business partner, Dorothy Washington. P.S. I took the microwave. It's mine. When we pulled out of that driveway for the last time, I rolled down the window and looked back at the house where I'd been a prisoner. Goodbye, hell, I said out loud. Tony laughed so hard he nearly missed the turn. I bet Vanessa called Marcus screaming, and I bet Marcus spent the evening frantically searching through corporate databases, trying to figure out what Wellington Holdings meant. James had arranged for me to stay at Magnolia Manor, a beautiful assisted living facility in Chevy Chase. Not because I needed assistance, I was perfectly capable of living independently, but because it was secure, comfortable, and gave us a safe base of operations while we prepared our legal strategy. The place was nothing like what Marcus and Vanessa had described when they talked about senior communities. This was luxury living, marble lobbies, concierge service, gourmet meals, activities, and amenities that made it feel more like a resort than a nursing home. My suite was 3 times the size of that prison room they'd kept me in, with a full kitchen, a living area, and a bedroom with a king-size bed. I had a balcony overlooking a beautiful garden, cable television with premium channels, high-speed internet, and my own phone line. But the best part wasn't the luxury, it was the respect. The staff treated me like an adult, asked my preferences, honored my choices. When I wanted to go to church on Sunday, they arranged transportation. When I wanted to have dinner with new friends I'd made, they made reservations. When I wanted to stay up late reading or sleep in the next morning, that was my decision to make. For the first time in months, I felt like a human being instead of a problem to be managed. Except I wasn't paying for Magnolia Manor. Marcus was. Through the business he didn't know I partially owned. See, as a 30% owner of Marcus Washington Esquire, I was entitled to quite a few things, like access to the firm's financial records, like input on major business decisions, like my share of the profits that had been accumulating in business accounts for 5 years. James had been busy during those first few days of my freedom. Not only had we documented the abuse and theft, but we'd also started exercising my rights as a minority owner in Marcus's law firm. I was entitled to see everything: financial statements, client lists, billing records, expense accounts, partnership agreements, and what we found was worse than I'd imagined. Marcus hadn't just built his success on my secret investment. He hadn't just benefited from years of my behind-the-scenes support. He'd been systematically defrauding clients, overcharging them, billing for services never provided, using the firm as his personal piggy bank. That mansion in Potomac, purchased with money from client settlement funds that were supposed to be held in trust. Those expensive vacations he and Vanessa took, billed to the firm as business development and client relations. That BMW and Mercedes in their driveway, leased through the firm and written off as business expenses, even though they were purely personal vehicles. But the most damaging discovery was the pattern of overbilling that had been going on for years. Marcus would tell clients a case would cost $5,000, then bill them $15,000. He'd charge for hours he'd never worked, for research that was never done, for court appearances that never happened. One elderly client, Mrs. Chen, had been charged $40,000 for what should have been a simple will and estate planning. Another client, a small business owner named Rodriguez, had been billed $60,000 for a contract dispute that Marcus had settled with 2 phone calls. And here's the beautiful part. As a 30% owner, I was legally entitled to stop it. I could call emergency board meetings, demand audits, require approval for major expenditures, even dissolve the partnership if I found evidence of malfeasance, which I had, plenty of it. Our first legal shot was simple: a demand letter outlining the theft from my personal accounts, the Medicare fraud, and the false imprisonment. We gave them 30 days to return all stolen funds, cease all fraudulent billing, and dissolve the illegal care arrangement. We also included a little surprise: a copy of the Wellington Holdings partnership agreement and a formal notice that I was exercising my ownership rights to conduct a full audit of Marcus Washington Esquire. Marcus called me within 2 hours of receiving that letter. I let it go to voicemail. Mama, what is this crazy letter about? What lawyer? What stolen money? You're not thinking clearly. This is all some big misunderstanding. Come home so we can talk about this like family. Come home. Like that prison cell was ever my home. The second call came from Vanessa, also went to voicemail. Dorothy, I don't know what lies someone has been telling you, but Marcus is worried sick. We've only ever tried to help you. This is so hurtful after everything we've done for you. Why are you trying to destroy our family? Our family. The family that had locked me in a room and stolen my money while telling me I should be grateful. The third call was different. Marcus's voice was strained, worried, and for the first time, respectful. Mama, I got a call from my business accountant. There are some questions about the original investment in my firm, some documents I've never seen before. Can you please call me back? We need to clear this up. Ah, now we were getting somewhere. James had been methodical in his approach. Not only had we documented the personal abuse and theft, but we'd also started a comprehensive audit of Marcus's business practices. As a minority owner, I had the right to examine every aspect of the firm's operations, and what we were finding was painting a picture of systematic fraud that went far beyond what they'd done to me. But we weren't done yet. Oh, we were just getting started. The fourth call came 3 days later, and this time Marcus sounded scared. Mama, please, I don't understand what's happening. The Maryland State Bar Association called. They're opening an investigation into my business practices. My malpractice insurance company is asking questions. Some of my clients are demanding to see their files. This is destroying everything I've worked for. Everything he'd worked for, built on my money, my support, my sacrifice, and maintained through fraud and theft. The fifth call was the one I'd been waiting for. Mama, I know you're angry. I know we handled things wrong. But please, can we meet? Can we talk about this face to face? I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Whatever it takes. Those were the words I needed to hear. The confrontation came on a Tuesday morning in the main lobby of Magnolia Manor. I'd chosen the location carefully: public place, witnesses, security cameras, and staff who knew me and cared about my welfare. I wasn't taking any chances with a man who'd already proven he was willing to lock up his own mother. Marcus arrived looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past month. His usually perfect suit was wrinkled, his hair was uncombed, and his hands were shaking slightly. The stress was showing, and for a brief moment, I felt a pang of sympathy for the little boy I'd raised. But then I remembered the locks on the doors, the money stolen from my accounts, the way he'd called me a burden, and my sympathy evaporated. Mama, he said, trying to take my hands across the small table where we sat. This has gone too far. I know we made mistakes, but you're destroying my life, my business, my reputation. Do you know what people are saying about me? I pulled my hands away and looked him straight in the eye. What are they saying, Marcus? They're saying I abused my own mother. They're saying I'm a thief, a fraud. The Bar Association is investigating me for malpractice. I could lose my license. I could go to prison. Good, I thought. It's about time the chickens came home to roost. And what would you like me to do about that? I asked calmly. Tell them it's not true. Tell them you were confused after your stroke, that you misunderstood our arrangement. Tell them we were just trying to help you, trying to keep you safe. There it was again, that word, help. Marcus, I said, my voice steady and clear, let me ask you something. In all the years I sacrificed for you, did you ever once ask me what I wanted, what I needed, what would make me happy? He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. When I worked 3 jobs to pay for your education, when I sold my mother's jewelry and my grandmother's quilts to pay your tuition, When I lived on peanut butter sandwiches so you could eat steak in college. Did you ever think about what that cost me? Not just the money, but the pieces of my life, the memories, the family heirlooms that could never be replaced? Mama, when I sent you every client I could find, when I talked you up to everyone who would listen, when I built your reputation one conversation at a time, did you ever thank me? Did you ever acknowledge that your success was built on my foundation? His face was getting pale, but I wasn't finished. When I invested my entire life savings in your firm so you could expand and become the success you are today, did you ever wonder where that money came from? Did you ever think that maybe, just maybe, someone who believed in you that much deserved better than being locked in a spare room and called a burden? What are you talking about? He whispered. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder of documents that James had prepared: corporate filings, partnership agreements, bank records, all the proof he needed to understand the truth. I own 30% of your law firm, Marcus. I have for 5 years. Wellington Holdings, LLC. That's my company, son. Your mama isn't just some ignorant old woman you can lock in a room and forget about. I'm your business partner. I'm the anonymous investor who saved your business when the banks wouldn't lend to you. I watched that information hit him like a physical blow. He took the documents with shaking hands, scanning through pages of legal paperwork that laid out the truth in black and white. This is impossible, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Check the dates on those documents. 5 years ago, when you needed $300,000 and couldn't find anyone willing to invest in a small black law firm. That was me, Marcus. That was your mother, believing in you even when nobody else would. He sat there in stunned silence, reading through the papers, understanding for the first time that his entire empire was built on the foundation of his mother's sacrifice. I never knew, he said finally. No, you never bothered to find out. You were so busy being successful, so busy being important, that you forgot where you came from. You forgot who made your success possible. And when it came time to take care of the woman who'd given you everything, you decided I was too much trouble. I'm sorry, Mama, he said, and for the first time in years, he sounded like my little boy again. I'm so sorry. Sorry for what, Marcus? Be specific. He took a shaky breath. For locking you up, for stealing your money, for calling you a burden, for treating you like you were worthless instead of like the woman who made everything I am possible. And for forgetting who you are, for forgetting what you mean to me, for becoming the kind of man who would abuse his own mother. It was a start, but I wasn't done yet. What do you want from me, Marcus? I want my mama back, he said, tears starting to form in his eyes. I want to make this right. I want to be the son you deserved, not the monster I became. And what are you willing to do to make that happen? Anything, everything. Just tell me what you want. Now we were getting to the heart of it. I want my money back. Every penny you and Vanessa stole from my accounts, with interest. I want restitution for the Medicare fraud, the false billing, all of it. Done. I want a formal apology, not just to me, but public acknowledgement of what you did wrong. I want it on record that you abused your mother and that you're making amends. He winced, but nodded. Okay. I want Vanessa prosecuted for her part in this. She was the one pushing the financial exploitation, and she needs to face consequences. Mama, No negotiation on that point, Marcus. She helped destroy our family for money. She pays the price. He nodded reluctantly. And I want complete transparency in your business practices. As a 30% owner, I'm taking an active role in how this firm operates. No more overcharging clients, no more fraudulent billing, no more using the business as your personal piggy bank. What does that mean for my practice? It means you're going to learn to be the lawyer I thought I was raising instead of the con man you became. You're going to treat your clients with respect, charge fair fees, and provide honest service. You're going to rebuild your reputation based on integrity instead of exploitation. And if I do all that, then maybe we can find our way back to being family again. Real family, based on love and respect instead of control and abuse. He sat there for a long moment, processing everything I'd said. I could see the wheels turning in his head, calculating the cost of my demands, weighing his options. What if I refuse? He asked quietly. What if I fight you on this? I smiled then, the kind of smile that probably reminded him of the woman who'd raised him to be better than this. Then you lose everything, baby. I exercise my ownership rights to dissolve the partnership, liquidate the business, and take my share of everything you've built. The Bar Association investigation continues. The criminal charges proceed, and you end up disbarred and probably in prison. You'd really do that? To your own son? Marcus, you locked your own mother in a spare room and stole her life savings. Don't talk to me about what family members will and won't do to each other. The negotiations took 3 months, but James and I got everything we demanded. Full restitution of all stolen funds, plus interest and penalties that brought the total to over $100,000. A formal written apology that became part of the court record, and a complete restructuring of Marcus's business practices with my oversight and approval. Vanessa, it turned out, was the mastermind behind most of the financial exploitation. When she realized the game was up and that criminal charges were inevitable, she tried to cut a deal by turning on Marcus and claiming she'd been manipulating him all along. She filed for divorce and tried to take half of everything, including the house, the cars, and Marcus's share of the law firm, except there was a prenup, one that I'd encouraged Marcus to insist on back when they got married. Sometimes being paranoid about gold diggers pays off. The prenup protected Marcus's business assets and limited Vanessa's claim to personal property acquired during the marriage. But since most of their wealth had come from fraudulent activities, there wasn't much left for her to claim anyway. She got nothing except a criminal record for elder abuse and financial exploitation. The conviction meant she lost her consulting business, her social standing, and her dreams of living off Marcus's success for the rest of her life. Marcus took it hard at first. He'd really loved her, or at least he'd loved the idea of her. The perfect wife who made him look successful and sophisticated. Finding out that she'd been the driving force behind exploiting his mother broke something in him. But it also freed him to become the man I'd always hoped he could be. The court-ordered community service was my idea. 200 hours of visiting seniors in assisted living facilities and nursing homes, listening to their stories, helping with activities, and most importantly, looking into the faces of elderly people who'd been forgotten by their families. I want you to understand, I told him, that every one of those people was someone's whole world once upon a time. They raised children, built careers, survived wars and depressions and heartbreaks. They deserve dignity and respect, not to be warehoused and forgotten. Those 200 hours changed him more than any lecture I could have given. He met elderly veterans who'd fought for our country and were now struggling with dementia while their families fought over their assets. He met retired teachers and nurses and factory workers who'd spent their lives serving others and were now being treated like burdens by their children. He met women like me, mothers who'd sacrificed everything for their children's success only to be discarded when they became inconvenient. By the time he finished his community service, Marcus was a different man, humbler, more empathetic, more aware of what really mattered in life. The business restructuring took longer, but it was necessary. We had to contact every client who'd been overcharged and make restitution. We had to implement new billing practices and oversight procedures. We had to rebuild the firm's reputation from the ground up. Some clients left, disgusted by what they'd learned about Marcus's practices, but others stayed, impressed by our commitment to making things right. And slowly, new clients began to come. People who'd heard about a lawyer who'd admitted his mistakes and was working to do better. Marcus's income dropped significantly during the first year. The mansion in Potomac had to be sold to pay restitution and legal fees. The expensive cars were traded for modest vehicles. The lavish lifestyle he and Vanessa had built on other people's money came to an end. But something interesting happened. As his practice became more honest, as he started treating clients with respect and charging fair fees, as he began to focus on actually helping people instead of just making money, his reputation began to improve. Word spread about Marcus Washington, the lawyer who'd made mistakes but was working hard to redeem himself, about the firm that put client service ahead of profit, that treated people with dignity regardless of their ability to pay premium fees. Within 2 years, the firm was more successful than it had ever been under the old model, not because Marcus was making more money per client, but because he was serving more clients better. He'd learned that sustainable success comes from integrity, not exploitation. As for me, I decided to stay at Magnolia Manor, at least for now. Not because I needed assisted living, but because I'd found a community there, real friends, people who valued my conversation and my company, not what I could do for them. I also decided to use my 30% ownership in Marcus's firm for something positive. We created the Washington Center for Elder Justice, a legal aid clinic specifically for seniors who were being abused or exploited by their families. Marcus runs it personally, providing free legal services to elderly people who can't afford to fight back against their abusers. It's his way of paying forward the second chance I gave him, and it's become the most meaningful part of his practice. We help grandmothers whose grandchildren are stealing their Social Security checks. We represent elderly parents whose children are trying to force them into nursing homes to get control of their assets. We fight for seniors who are being financially exploited by caretakers, family members, or unscrupulous businesses. Every case reminds Marcus of what he did to me and why he can never let himself become that kind of person again. The money I recovered from Marcus, plus the profits from my investment in the firm, gave me something I'd never had before in my 73 years: true financial independence. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to worry about money, didn't have to sacrifice my needs for someone else's wants. I bought a beautiful condo in Arlington, right by the Potomac River, where I can watch the sunrise every morning and remember that every day is a gift. I furnished it with pieces I chose because I loved them, not because they were practical or affordable. I travel now, something I'd never been able to do when I was working 3 jobs and raising Marcus. I've been to Paris, to Rome, to Egypt, places I'd only dreamed about while I was scrubbing other people's floors and ironing other people's clothes. But the best part isn't the luxury or the travel, it's the respect. People listen when I speak now. My opinions matter. My choices are honored. I'm not invisible anymore. Marcus visits me every Sunday now, and these aren't the obligatory hurried visits from before. He comes because he wants to, because he's learned to value our relationship in a way he never did when he thought I'd always be there waiting for whatever scraps of attention he was willing to throw my way. He asks me questions about my life, my thoughts, my dreams. He's learned about the woman I was before I became his mother, the bookkeeper who was good with numbers, the young woman who had ambitions of her own before life and circumstances narrowed her choices. He's learned that being old doesn't mean being invisible, and being someone's mother doesn't mean being their property. He's learned that respect flows both ways, regardless of age or dependency. Last month, he brought his new girlfriend to meet me. Patricia teaches third grade at an elementary school in Southeast D.C., the same neighborhood where I raised Marcus. She volunteers at a literacy center on weekends and spends her summers teaching reading to kids whose parents can't afford tutoring. When she shook my hand, she looked me directly in the eyes and said, "Mrs. Washington, Marcus talks about you all the time. He says you're the strongest person he's ever known. Not the smartest, not the most successful, but the strongest." After a lifetime of feeling invisible, that recognition meant everything. "I like her," I told Marcus after Patricia excused herself to use the restroom. "Really?" He looked surprised and pleased. "Why?" "Because she sees you for who you are now, not just who you were when you were being stupid. And because she treats me like a person, not like some relic from your past you're embarrassed about." He laughed at that. A real laugh, not the fake one he used to use when he was trying to humor me. "Mama," he said, "I've been thinking about what you said that day in the lobby, about asking what you want instead of assuming I know. So I'm asking, what do you want now? What would make you happy?" I thought about that question for a long moment. For so many years, what I wanted didn't matter. I wanted whatever would help Marcus succeed, whatever would keep our family together, whatever would make other people's lives easier. But now, for the first time, someone was asking what Dorothy Washington wanted for herself. "I want to help other people who are where I was," I said finally. "I want to make sure no other mother has to break out of her own son's prison to get her dignity back." And that's exactly what I'm doing. I speak at conferences now, telling my story to social workers, lawyers, geriatricians, and family members. I've written a guidebook for seniors about protecting their assets and recognizing the signs of financial abuse. I've helped dozens of other families work through similar situations without having to go through the courts. But mostly, I want people to understand this fundamental truth. Getting old doesn't mean becoming powerless. It doesn't mean your children get to make decisions for you, or about you, or instead of you. Your age might change, your circumstances might change, but your right to dignity, respect, and self-determination doesn't change. I spent 73 years being the strong one, the one who sacrificed, the one who put everyone else first. I thought that's what good mothers were supposed to do, disappear into the background so their children could shine brighter. I was wrong about that. Good mothers raise children who honor their strength, not exploit it. Good mothers teach their children that love is about lifting each other up, not locking each other away. Good mothers show their children that respect flows both ways. regardless of age or dependency, or who needs help from whom. And sometimes, good mothers have to remind their grown children of these lessons in ways they'll never forget. My name is Dorothy Washington, and I own the keys to my own empire now. It might have taken me 73 years to figure out that I deserved those keys, but as my grandmother used to say, better late than never. To any other mother out there who's locked in a room, literal or metaphorical, by children who've forgotten where they came from, let me tell you something. You have more power than you know. You have more value than they're telling you, and you have every right to break free and reclaim your life. The sacrifices you made for your children don't make you their property. The love you gave them doesn't make you their prisoner. The foundation you built for their success doesn't mean you have to disappear into that foundation. You raised them. You know what they're capable of, both good and bad. You know their weaknesses, their fears, their pressure points, and if they've forgotten the lessons you taught them about respect and decency, sometimes you have to remind them in ways that get their attention. Don't let them make you forget who you are. Don't let them convince you that your time is over, that your voice doesn't matter, that your needs come last. Don't let them lock you away, literally or figuratively, just because taking care of you isn't convenient for their perfect lives. Stand up, fight back, document everything, get legal help, exercise whatever power you have, whether it's financial, social, or just the power of truth telling. Use their own success against them if you have to, because chances are you had more to do with building that success than they want to admit. And remember, every queen deserves her crown, no matter how many years she's been wearing it. That's my story. That's how I broke out of my son's prison and took back the keys to my empire. That's how I learned that it's never too late to demand the respect you've always deserved. And honey, let me tell you something. Freedom tastes sweeter when you've had to fight for it. Dignity means more when you've had to reclaim it. And family love is stronger when it's built on truth instead of lies. Marcus and I have a better relationship now than we've had in years, not because I let him get away with what he did, but because I didn't. Not because I made it easy for him to forget his mistakes, but because I made sure he learned from them. He's a better man now because I demanded that he be better. He's a better lawyer because I required him to practice with integrity. He's a better son because I refuse to accept being treated as anything less than the woman who made his success possible. Sometimes love means holding people accountable. Sometimes being a good mother means teaching your grown children consequences. Sometimes saving your family means being willing to tear it apart and rebuild it on a stronger foundation. That foundation isn't just about money or success or reputation. It's about respect, dignity, and remembering that every person, regardless of age, deserves to be treated like a human being instead of a problem to be managed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a kingdom to run. A small kingdom, maybe, but it's mine. And after 73 years of building other people's empires, that's exactly how it should be. The crown fits perfectly, and I'm never taking it off again.